You're doing intermittent fasting. You're skipping meals. You're staying disciplined. And yet, the weight isn't coming off. Or worse, it started dropping and then suddenly stopped. This is the moment where most people begin to question everything. Am I doing something wrong? Is fasting not for me? But what if the real problem isn't your effort, and it isn't your body either? What if the reason intermittent fasting isn't working is because you're following the strategy, but missing the mechanism? Because here's the truth that almost no one explains. Intermittent fasting doesn't cause weight loss. It creates the conditions for weight loss, and if those conditions are not met, nothing happens. Let me explain this in the simplest way possible. Your body has two primary modes, storage mode and burning mode. When insulin is high, your body stores energy. When insulin drops low enough, your body starts burning stored fat. This shift is what we call metabolic switching, and this is where real weight loss begins. But here's where things go wrong. Most people focus only on the fasting window. They believe that if they fast for 16 hours, their body will automatically burn fat. But your body doesn't follow a clock. It follows signals, hormonal signals. And the most important one is insulin. Every time you eat, your insulin rises. That's normal. But depending on what you eat, how stressed you are, and how sensitive your body is, insulin can stay elevated for much longer than you think. So even if you stop eating, your body might still be in storage mode. And if that happens, your fasting window becomes ineffective. You're not eating, but you're not burning fat either. And that's one of the most frustrating places to be. Because from the outside, it looks like you're doing everything right. But internally, the system isn't aligned. Let me ask you something. Have you ever followed a fasting routine, stayed consistent, and still felt like your results didn't match your effort? Like you were doing more but getting less? If that sounds familiar, then what you're about to understand next is going to change how you see fasting completely. Because once you understand what's actually blocking your progress, you stop guessing and start fixing the real problem. Now let's talk about what's really blocking your weight loss, even when you're fasting consistently. Because if intermittent fasting isn't working for you, it's not random. There is always a reason. And most of the time, it comes down to three invisible factors that almost no one pays attention to. The first is what happens before your fast even begins. Most people focus on the fasting window, but ignore the meal that comes right before it. And that meal determines everything. If your last meal of the day is high in sugar, refined carbohydrates, or ultra-processed foods, your insulin levels stay elevated for hours. That means your body remains in storage mode long into your fasting window. So even though you stopped eating at 8 p.m., your body might not enter fat-burning mode until much later. And by then, half of your fasting window is already gone. This is one of the biggest reasons people fast and still don't lose weight. The second factor is hidden interruptions during the fast. This one is subtle, but extremely common. A little milk in your coffee, a flavored drink, even certain low-calorie or zero-sugar products can trigger an insulin response. And the moment insulin rises, fat burning stops. Not slowly, not partially. It stops. So what happens? You think you're fasting for 16 hours, but metabolically, your body never actually entered fat-burning mode. And this happens day after day, without you realizing it. The third factor is stress, and this is where things become even more complex. When your body is under stress, whether from lack of sleep, emotional pressure, or even aggressive fasting, it releases cortisol. Cortisol increases blood sugar to give you quick energy, but increased blood sugar leads to increased insulin. And as you already know, when insulin is elevated, fat burning is turned off. So even if you're fasting, your body is still operating in a storage-friendly environment. This is why some people feel stuck. They are doing the work, but their internal signals are telling their body to hold on. Now there's another mistake that looks harmless, but has a massive impact. What you eat when you break your fast. After hours without food, it's easy to go for something quick, something satisfying, something that feels like a reward. But if that first meal is high in sugar or refined carbs, you create a sharp insulin spike. And that spike doesn't just affect that moment. It affects the next several hours. It delays your next opportunity to enter fat-burning mode. So instead of spending your day in fat-burning mode, you spend most of it going in and out of storage mode, never fully accessing your fat stores. Let me ask you something important. When you break your fast, are you thinking strategically or emotionally? Because that one decision has more impact than the fasting window itself. Because that one decision has more impact than the fasting window itself. And here's the part most people miss. Intermittent fasting is not about eating less. It's about creating the right hormonal environment where your body can finally access stored fat. And if that environment is not there, no amount of fasting will fix it. In the next part, I'm going to show you exactly how to structure intermittent fasting the right way, so your body actually enters fat-burning mode and stays there long enough to make a real difference. Now let's fix it, because once you understand what's actually blocking your results, the solution becomes much clearer and much simpler than most people expect. You don't need extreme fasting. You don't need to push your body to the limit. What you need is alignment. Alignment between your fasting window, your meals, and your internal state. So here's the correct way to structure intermittent fasting for real weight loss. Step 1. Stop forcing the 16-hour rule. This is one of the biggest misconceptions. People believe that 16 hours is the magic number, but your body doesn't respond to fixed numbers. It responds to metabolic readiness. If your body is still dependent on constant glucose, forcing long fasting windows increases stress and raises cortisol. And as you've already seen, higher cortisol can block fat loss. So instead of jumping into 16 or 18 hours, start with 12 to 14 hours. Let your body adapt. Let insulin drop naturally. And once your system becomes more flexible, extending your fasting window becomes easier and more effective. Step 2. Fix your last meal. This is where most people lose hours of fat-burning potential without realizing it. Your last meal determines how quickly your body enters fat-burning mode during the fast. If that meal is high in sugar, refined carbs, or ultra-processed foods, insulin stays elevated longer. That delays the metabolic switch. But if your last meal is built around protein, healthy fats, and fiber, insulin stabilizes, and your body transitions into fat burning much faster. This is one of the simplest changes, with the biggest impact. Step 3. Protect your fasting window. This means eliminating anything that could trigger an insulin response. Even small things matter. Sweetened coffee, flavored drinks, low-calorie snacks. These can all interrupt the process. During your fasting window, your goal is simple. Keep insulin low. Water, black coffee, plain tea. Nothing else. This is what allows your body to stay in fat-burning mode long enough to make a difference. Step 4. Break your fast with intention. This is where most people undo their progress. After hours without food, they eat whatever is available, usually something high in sugar or refined carbs, and that creates a sharp insulin spike. Your body immediately shifts back into storage mode, and it takes hours to return to fat-burning mode again. So instead, start your first meal with protein. Add healthy fats. Include fiber. This combination stabilizes blood sugar and prevents a large insulin spike. It allows your body to transition smoothly, without shutting down fat burning completely. Step 5. Manage stress and recovery. This is the hidden layer. If your sleep is poor, if your stress is high, if you rely on caffeine to function, your body is already under pressure. Adding aggressive fasting on top of that can backfire. Instead of pushing harder, stabilize your system. Improve sleep. Reduce unnecessary stress. Use fasting as a tool, not as a punishment. Because fat loss is not just about eating less, it's about creating the right internal environment. Step 6. Consistency over intensity. This is where real results come from, not from doing everything perfectly for a few days, but from doing the right things consistently over time. A consistent 14-hour fast done correctly will always outperform an inconsistent 18-hour fast done poorly. And here's what happens when you start doing this the right way. Your energy stabilizes. Cravings begin to fade. You stop thinking about food all the time. And gradually, your body starts to change. The weight that felt stuck begins to move. In the final part, I'm going to show you the most common mistakes that silently block weight loss, even when everything seems right, and how to avoid falling back into the same cycle again. Now, here's the part that most people never realize, and it's often the reason why intermittent fasting stops working after a few weeks. Because even when you understand the structure, even when you apply the steps, there are still small, silent mistakes that can completely block your progress. The first mistake is expecting fasting to compensate for everything else. This is one of the biggest traps. People believe that as long as they fast, they can eat anything during the eating window. But your body doesn't separate fasting from feeding. It sees everything as one continuous system. If your eating window is filled with ultra-processed foods, excess sugar, and constant spikes in blood glucose, your insulin remains elevated more often than you think. And when insulin stays high, fat burning stays off. So fasting cannot undo poor food choices. It only works when both sides of the equation are aligned. The second mistake is undereating and then overcompensating. Many people eat too little during their eating window, thinking it will accelerate weight loss. But this often backfires. Your body senses the restriction and responds by increasing hunger hormones. Cravings intensify, energy drops, and eventually you overeat, usually in the least controlled moments. This creates a cycle of restriction and compensation that disrupts consistency and keeps your metabolism unstable. The third mistake is ignoring adaptation. Your body is incredibly efficient. When you introduce a new routine, like intermittent fasting, it responds quickly. But over time, it adapts. This means the same strategy that worked in the beginning may become less effective if nothing else changes. Not because fasting stopped working, but because your body became more efficient. This is why small adjustments over time are necessary. Slight changes in meal composition, timing, or fasting duration can reactivate progress. The fourth mistake is relying only on the scale. This is where many people lose motivation too early. Weight on the scale fluctuates for many reasons: water retention, glycogen levels, hormonal shifts. And if you judge your progress only by that number, you might think nothing is happening, even when your body is changing internally. Fat loss is not always immediately visible, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. The fifth mistake is inconsistency disguised as effort. You fast during the week, but not on weekends. You follow the structure for a few days, then break it. You make progress, then reset it. And over time, the pattern becomes unstable. Your body never fully adapts. It never reaches a point where fat burning becomes efficient, because consistency is what allows your system to shift and stay there. So let me ask you something one last time. What if the reason intermittent fasting hasn't worked for you isn't because your body is resistant, but because these small patterns have been quietly blocking your progress? Because now you can see them. You understand that fasting is not a shortcut. It's a system, one that depends on insulin, stress, food quality, and consistency. And once these elements are aligned, everything starts to change. This is where frustration turns into clarity. If this made you look at fasting differently, don't just move on. Apply it. Start with one change. Fix your last meal. Clean your fasting window. Break your fast with intention. And most importantly, stay consistent long enough to let your body respond. If you want a simple structure to follow, I've created a step-by-step guide to help you apply this without confusion. You'll find it in the description below. Subscribe if you want to understand your body beyond trends. And finally, make weight loss work the way it should. And share this with someone who feels stuck. Because sometimes, the difference between trying harder and finally seeing results is just understanding what actually matters. This is not just about fasting. It's about finally working with your body instead of against it.